When did you realize that you didn't have a normal family? When people wanted to stay at my house because my parents were never home. I was like 15 and was home by myself watching a scary movie. It's nighttime and I hear something literally SCRping against the side of my house. I am freaking the FCK out. It keeps going. I finally get the balls to go outside and look, and it's our F-king goat eating the damn grass, weeds and shit right outside my window, and he's SCRping his damn horns on the outside of the house. Went to a friend's birthday party when I was maybe 5-6. His whole extended family was there. And they all got along. And did stuff together. My family gatherings consist of everyone getting into epic fights. Only way to preserve the peace is to start to drink. Our personal Stalingrad occurred when my aunt gave my other aunt a DLDO and told her to go FCK herself for everyone's sake. Cake was thrown and guns were drawn. When my mom kidnapped me and then wound up in jail. Edit. I also forgot to add that she sent me a letter a couple of months later and all it said was "Mom is still in jail" with a stick figure drawing of her frowning in jail at the very corner. My family keeps a dictionary by the table to haul out in case of disagreements about the meaning of a word over dinner. At times we had more books than actually fit on the shelves we had. And we had bookshelves in every room that didn't also have a sink. It was when I discovered that nobody else lived like that I realized we were abnormal. It took me an embarrassingly long time to realize that not everyone's mom will come up with a song for the pets. My mom sings about our dogs wearing pajamas in the car. And the dogs get excited and start running around. She will sing them a song. She has made a song for each of our pets. They all have their own personal lyrics and tune. Some of us have started singing the songs when we see that specific pet, and some of the pets now respond. My tortoise shell will bound up and meow at you if you sing her song. Edit. People seem to like the pajama song. Here it is. Who's a dog? Yes, you are. Cause dogs wear pajamas in the car. Cause they're dogs. Edit 2. My mom will also grab someone's tummy, be it human or animal, and sing "Must be jelly cause jam don't jiggle like that." Jugga jug jugga jug whilst jiggling aforementioned belly. I realized it the moment I went to a friend's house for the first time and discovered that there wasn't almost non-stop yelling and cursing. Also, when I had friends over and noticed that my mother was overly nice and accommodating. Not a normal screaming self, almost like she was pretending that we were a normal family. That I didn't know a single thing about my parents' lives before me. It culminated when they let it slip. One night when I was home from college. That they were both married once before. I was 22. When I went to a friend's house and they didn't order a pizza for every person. My family is fat. Edit. My parents hosted Christmas one year when I was a teen. A bunch of our family came over and got super drunk. Our Jewish neighbor called and said we should all stop by and say hi at their Hanukkah party. 10-15 drunk people walked down the street barefoot and with pitchers of mixed drinks in our hands. We entered their house and they were having a very quiet Hanukkah with 10 very sober seeming people eating and talking here and there. That quickly changed to 20-25 super loud drunk people having fun and at one point having a southern rap battle where everyone contributed to the song with their best southern accent and southern verses. The next day our neighbor thanked us so much for coming. He said everyone, including the old Jewish ladies, had a blast. When I started preschool and realized I didn't speak the same language as everyone else. I was in first grade. And some local cops came and ate lunch at school with us. One sat next to me. I was so excited to meet a cop in person I asked if he knew my mom. He did. Something about the way he responded immediately made me realize this was not a good thing. My mother, my whole family, really, has a very long history of drug abuse, burglary, vandalism, assault battery, a few murder investigations, no charges. I think. etc etc. I'm not really sure how I turned out so well. All things considered. Every year for Easter my parents would set up a video camera in the living room overnight so that we can catch the Easter bunny in the act while he hid our baskets and colored eggs around the house. We would go to bed right after we set it up and started recording. After about 20 minutes of recording, a stuffed animal bunny would be hopping around the living room using a stop motion technique that my parents used. Hopping around hiding our eggs and baskets. As kids we thought it was absolutely amazing that we caught the real Easter bunny in the act. When we would have family over for Easter dinner we would show everyone how sneaky and clever we were that we got it on camera. Kinda weird, but I cannot wait to do this to my kids one day. The first time I bought film for a camera. See? The canister, black with a grey top, didn't smell the way it was supposed to. One of my favorite comforting childhood things was the smell of empty film canisters. It turns out that they don't really have a smell. My parents used to use the empties to store PCP. I grew up in an area where a lot of kids didn't have divorced parents. My friends would be like, "Ask your mom if I can come over." She said no. "Well, ask your dad." Question mark? Why? I feel that. Just get the money from your dad if your mom won't give it to you. Oh, it's not a matter of won't. We don't have it. And dad? Yeah, let me know if you see him. When my mom threw the Christmas tree outside with all the decorations on it, this was 5 years ago. Dad's a veteran cop and is currently a homicide investigator. Discussing the latest murders, rapes, robberies over dinner wasn't done at my friends' houses. My mother trying to kill my father after their separation. One of my earliest Christmas memories. When I went to other people's houses and their parents' beds weren't made and clothes ironed and put away right away. Both my parents are military and neat freaks. The day I realized the stray dog running in our backyard was actually a bear cub and that my parents knew the whole time and were completely okay with it. Probably right around the moment my dad had us duck below the door sill of his truck as we drove by a cop on our way back home to our mom. He had kidnapped us and holed up in a hotel for 3 days. Age 4. When I realized as a kid that my great aunt and great uncle weren't married, but brother and sister. As long as I knew them they lived together. Young me just assumed they were married. But nope. Neither of them ever married and spent basically their entire lives together. Growing up my dad was an alcoholic and there was a lot of yelling and arguments in the house. I had a sleepover at a friend's house and they made dinner together. Actually we're like those TV families that were cooperative and stuff. There was no yelling and the dad was helping out around the house and playing with my friend's siblings. It was a sleepover and I fell asleep silently crying because I never knew families could be functional and happy. Edit. Thanks for the replies guys. I was 16 at the sleepover and I'm 26 now. Dad has been sober for almost a year now and is a huge help as a grandpa to my daughter. I actually moved back to my parents' house and am rebuilding a relationship with my dad I never had before. When I realized it wasn't just me and my siblings who were afraid of my parents, so were our friends. I realized probably most when I was early 20s and thinking about kids and I was like, wait. I wouldn't do that to my kids. But I remember going to people's houses or chatting at school and being confused as to why they weren't terrified of everything. Like my mum made us run kidnapping drills for when we all went to get groceries. So not even when we were alone, but when we went as a family we still had to be prepped on what to do in case of a pedophile. And I asked her once if I could do odd jobs for the neighbors to earn some pocket money. Bear in mind I was 13 and we lived in a small country town and had known our neighbors well for over 20 years. And she told me a story about 2 little kids doing that and how one got tied up and up-ed and then decapitated while her sister was forced to watch. Like. Just tell me you don't want me to do it, mum. Well. When I was a kid. I noticed when people asked me where my dad was and I didn't have an answer for them. Hell if I know. I know who he is. But not where he went. Aside from that. In high school I just consciously looked around and realized that damn near the entire family I grew up with was female. There was no male influence to speak of. My aunt and mom were divorcee single moms who were thick as thieves. And my cousin and I practically grew up as sisters. I actually mentioned it one Christmas and my mom growled. We're like a clan of hyenas. We laugh at inappropriate times and men fear us. Asterisk. Then she started cackling. She may have been drinking. When my grandfather brought up the mafia connections at a family dinner. And nobody batted an eye. Edit. Because it's being brought up. Yes, my family does make badass Italian meals. When everyone at my work was confused that at 18 years old, I had to ask permission to go outside. I mean, there are other things. Like I was taught to be skeptical and angry and judgmental towards anyone else who wasn't in my immediate family. But I did outgrow that and I have a lot more friends now and I'm friendlier to people. My parents, on the other hand, are still very negative. Bitter people who have no friends whatsoever. Who never go out and do anything. They are both in their early 40s. Kind of a sad life. But they brought it on themselves by being bitter and judgy people. We had family dinners every day growing up and we would talk about science, politics, history, religion, as well as less serious topics. I was pretty surprised when I learned a lot people only ate with their families once or twice a week. I was 10, so in 5th grade. A super misfit at school. I dressed like Dawn Weiner in Welcome to the Dollhouse and I was awkward and weird to boot. My dad and stepmom were super obsessed with my grades to the point that they'd schedule multiple conferences with my teachers outside of the usual parent-teacher conference. My grades were all A's with maybe a B or 2. It was overbearing and beginning to bother me. What made things worse is that I'd recently discovered while snooping through my stepmom's things that she was running a side gig as a stripper and she'd go to these meetings at my school in embarrassing stripper-like clothes. Casual stripper clothes. The kids would see her and tease me so much about it. That's when I realized that my life wasn't normal and I needed to get the FCK away from those people. When my dad had to go to a rehabilitation center for suicidal tendencies. He had mapped out my mom's finances for the next 5 years based off of her salary and his life insurance. And had planned to hang himself. When he presented his plan to my mother, she said he'd read it to her as plainly as if he was reading off a grocery list for her approval. He seriously thought it was a good idea. Because in his mind, his depression caused him to be a drain on her. That or by the 3rd time we were rushing out to my half-sister's college town for another suicide attempt. Only to again find her happy to see us and happy for the extra attention. She has borderline personality disorder. We don't speak. My mom's new boyfriend came to dinner and we were supposed to be on our best behavior. All was good until my sister talked about a boyfriend with that last name Titbull. Jokes ensued. Titbull. Etc. My other sister had just taken a bite and laughed so hard after hearing Titbull that she threw up on her hand at the table. My mom, completely mortified and also has a weak stomach, started gagging. I then proceeded to laugh at my mom's reaction so hard that my nose bled and then I started vomiting on the floor. No worries though. Along comes the dog to mop up the vomit with his tongue. Typical family dinner. When I was 8, it was the 1960s. And my mom went to graduate school to get her master's degree. And ultimately her doctorate. All of the other kids' moms were stay-at-home moms. I caught a lot of grief for it. Which I pretty much ignored. Haha. Your mom is smart. Driven and accomplished. When my mom told me the story of her mom stabbing her dad. When I realized none of my other friends had a half-acre veggie garden, fruit orchard, kept bees, or sold stuff at farmers markets on the weekend. I lived in the suburbs. But my parents were really crunchy before it was hipster. When my first girlfriend's mother told her she couldn't come over to my house at all because there wasn't a corresponding mother there. It was because my mom died right in front of me of a brain aneurysm when I was 14. I would say growing up without a mother is not normal. Also, my first girlfriend's mother was not a good person. getting a greeting card from an insane asylum telling us how 3 of my grandfather's siblings were doing. How sorry they were to have heard about his sister's passing, as she too was once a patient. Signed, Staff. I was in my first therapy session. I explained to the therapist that I had just gone crazy 10 years ago for no reason. And I felt really bad about imposing my crazy on my family. But she pointed out I had also told her my sister was on the autism spectrum and tried to murder me several times. I don't want to insinuate that one led to the other. But both were difficult for me for different reasons. My dad literally wouldn't come home from work sometimes. And my mom spent at least half the month in bed with migraines for most of my childhood before going temporarily crazy due to hypothyroidism. Later I'd come to realize dad is also an alcoholic pothead. And we're one of the sanest branches of my family. So, whenever my mother would admire something my grandmother owned, she would say in all seriousness, "When you die I want that." I never really thought of the implications of that statement as a child. But as a teenager it finally hit me. I also realized my mother had literally no sense of accountability for herself. And has a completely external locus of control, i.e. everything that happens to her is because of something external. She literally acts like she is powerless to change anything in her situation. When asked what I did in school that day, I said we did an anonymous survey to see what our families consisted of. Until then, I didn't realize it was strange to be raised by your grandparents. Only one boy in class was aside from me. My mom overheard this and started screaming at me that I had to change the answers when I got to school the next day. Even though I explained we already handed them in and they weren't signed. She was flipping out over it. I didn't understand and apologized for somehow messing up. My grandma said nothing. As an adult, and knowing how much my mom is a quit, I realized that she was upset because she'd be claiming me as a single mother and that she lived alone in our home with me to get assistance. My grandparents had a different address on the same property and I learned that I had to pretend I was living with my mother only because of it. Well, when I learned my parents met at a science fiction convention, it all started to make sense. When my parents actively and consistently encouraged to explore various aspects of my personality, read, goth phase, and treated me like a human with thoughts, feelings and responsibilities. Also, they're still married. I felt really bad for the people I went to middle and high school with. When I was younger, my parents would stay up late practicing all the cheats in Mario Kart so they could beat me the next time we played. When everyone in my family got along together and we didn't fight, we were the odd ones out in my group of friends. When I told my buddy I couldn't go to Tim's for lunch BC I had to give my dad gas money. I'm 15. He's 54. Not complaining. Family sticks together. It's just weird. Probably when my mom came to pick me up for visitation and my dad wouldn't let her take me. Then she dragged me out of the house and I literally became a tug of war subject between my mom and dad. With my mom pulling on my feet and my dad pulling on my arms. Shortly after, I was taken away by Child Protective Services. I first noticed it when I thought to myself, the families of these other kids sure are a lot more loving than mine. I don't even remember what age I realized this. I just know I was probably a toddler. It got to the point where if I was shown too much affection without being ignored, hit, or yelled at, I'd have a panic attack. I thought I deserved everything that happened to me for years, and tried to downplay it and dissociate myself from it as much as I could. This was until I was 13, and somebody flat out told me I was being abused, and did nothing to warrant the treatment. It's still hard for me to deal with. Growing up, my mother was always really weird. Our house was always messy even though she spent all day in the house. And she was always having strange episodes. Once, she had laryngitis and didn't speak for weeks. I only recently found out that she did not have laryngitis. She just refused to speak to her family. For weeks. Keep in mind my siblings and I were just kids at the time. Anyway, I assumed that everyone else's mums were all weird too. One day, I had a friend over after school. We walked into the house and my mum was lying in the middle of the floor, not moving. She was so weirded out and said, "Is she okay?" I replied, "Yes, she's fine, let's go upstairs and play games." I was totally unfazed. But my friend kept bringing it up and it was then I realized something was off.